Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our weekly virtual tasting at the Whisky Exchange. Tonight we're going to be tasting spirits of the juniper variety, otherwise known as gin. Now this evening's event has been aptly named the Gin Palace because that is what we'll be tasting, and yes, we do enjoy the glitzier things in life. But the focus tonight will very much be flavour and aroma, as I am joined by a panel of experts made up of producers from up and down the country. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gareth and I'm an events organiser and spirits lover at the Whisky Exchange, so welcome. One thing that has been really amazing throughout my journey up towards this gin tasting is finding out the stories that each of these guests have tonight behind them. Each one is as inspirational as the last. So let's get a short introduction of them all. Hannah, if you would like to start.
Hi, my name is Hannah and I work for the Capreolus Distillery, and I am here representing Linden Lime Gin that we produce at our still house in Leith, Edinburgh. Do you want me to go into sort of...
We just run through all of the panel just now, and then we'll go one by one through the gins. And Guillaume.
Good evening, I'm Guillaume Drouin from Christian Drouin company. We produce le Gin de Christian Drouin, which is actually which has the originality to be produced with more than 30 different kind of apples.
Fantastic. And Barney.
Hi, I'm Barney Wilczak and I'm from the Capreolus Distillery. We're based out in the Cotswolds, so beautiful area, and we produce eau de vie, so I've enjoyed Guillaume's products a lot. And we also make Garden Swift Gin.
Fantastic. Next in the lineup tonight will be Jack, however he's running a tad late, so we'll just move quickly on to Simon.
Hi there, Simon Ford here from Ford's Gin. Been working in gin in some capacity since 1998, so gin is now fully in my blood. And you know, after working probably 15 years for Plymouth Gin and then to the New York Distilling Company, decided to create Ford's Gin, which we'll get to try the reserve today.
Brilliant. So in the absence of Jack already, everybody, you can see that from small batch blended gins to distilled overproof and aged in sherry cask gins, which we will get to try from Ford's tonight, we do actually have a little bit of everything, and the panel themselves definitely far outweigh my expertise in the world of gin, so I'm excited to get going. Whether you're a sort of connoisseur or a real beginner, or simply just enjoy a G&T in the park on the weekend, the next hour is sure to be interesting. If you're watching live at home and you're not in the Zoom chat room, please do feel free to ask any questions on the comments on Facebook. We will pick them up and we will put them to our expert panel. So without holding up too much, more about the guys that are with us. The first guest I'm introducing today is Hannah Mitchell, that's joining us from the Port of Leith Distillery in Edinburgh. Now this is very much a distillery that we should all be keeping an eye on. Not least because it's in Scotland and you can surely pick up the best days out in Edinburgh, but because as a young company, they are just so refreshing. And at a short glance, you can see that they're up to some very interesting things. You know, for a 2-and-a-bit-year-old company, 3-and-a-bit-year-old company, Hannah will maybe correct me. They've released a distillery sherry, a gin that took me smack bang by surprise, and something very interesting that we should all be waiting for that's coming out soon. So without giving too much away, I will pass over to Hannah, who's going to take us through the first gin of this evening and share a little bit about what it means to be working at the Port of Leith Distillery with Lind and Lime Gin. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Gareth. Well, Gareth is right. We are a very, very young company. A good few years sort of in our thoughts and our dreams, but we began producing in November 2018, and that was when we began producing Lind and Lime. And I do hope that you have your tasting samples there. As I said, I work for the Capreolus Distillery, and I do hope that you all keep an eye on us because we are doing some very exciting things in the next few years. The main thing is we are building Scotland's first vertical whisky distillery, and that will open on the Port of Leith, right next to Ocean Terminal. It was due for next year, but unfortunately with COVID-19, we've had to push that back slightly. But, you know, things are progressing and it's very interesting, so we will get there at some point. The focus at the moment, though, is the gin, and where, as a company, the Portlace Distillery, we look towards the future and the future of whisky and where we can take whisky. Linden Lime is all about looking at the past and where we've come from and the story of where we've come from. And with Linden Lime, the aim was to really produce a benchmark London Dry gin, a classic London Dry, that people can really enjoy. It's juniper led. It's also got those citrus notes that I hope everyone can sort of pick up from their tasting. And it was really all about the brand history. And Linden Lime, it really tells the story of leaf and the importance that leaf had in terms of spirit production. So the first thing that I'll sort of talk about is the bottle design. And I mean, the bottle is certainly one of the things that gets us the most attention. Everyone just loves the bottle, and it's beautiful. And it's won us so many awards. We just won double gold in the San Francisco awards last week for branding, so that's amazing. And the bottle design, it really comes back to the importance of glass in leaf. And you may notice if you have a bottle that on the bottom, and you might be able to see it in the Zoom chat, we embossed the bottom with leaf glassworks. Now, back in the sort of mid 17th century, Leith was home to leaf glassworks, and this was a huge industrial area in Leith on the port, and that was where they made, yep, Gareth has got a bottle right there, and that was where they made all this glass, because at that time, Leith was a working port. You had lots of sherries coming in from Spain, you had your ports from Portugal, your French wines, and these are all coming into the port in ships and casks, and there was a huge demand for making glass. Also at that time, Edinburgh certainly was a leader in terms of medical innovation, and so there was a huge demand for glass for that. And that was when Leith Glassworks was established, and the perfect place for it to be was on the port at Leith, because you had so much access to sand and kelp, which is exactly what you need for glass. So this was a huge development. The actual furnace towers, they were about 100 feet high. They were huge. You could see them all throughout Edinburgh. And that was where all the bottles were made. And that was where the idea came to sort of make this sort of shape of bottle, a sort of wine-shaped bottle, and to emboss the bottom with Leith Glassworks just to commemorate that history that Leith had. Also, one of our company owners, Ian, he had worked in the wine trade for a while and was really keen to use wine bottles to bottle spirits. And he always had this idea of using a wine bottle to bottle a clear spirit. We also thought that would be really cheap to do. Of course, then it came to light that, well, of course, wine has to be bottled in 75 cl and spirits are 70 cl. We could do that. So it was back to the drawing board, and we came up with this bespoke design. Our bottles are made in Italy, and we had to go through a good 2 years process of actually getting the bottles designed and made, and a bespoke mold being made. Now, when we were given a prototype, in this glass colour. The glass colour is actually very unique to us as a brand. As a brand, we really care about being, as sustainable as possible. And the glass in the Linden Lime bottle, this sort of off-green colour, that's actually a waste product that you get from glass production. So normally when they transition from white to green glass, they would just normally make this sort of colour, and this would be discarded. But we had received a prototype in this colour, and we just thought it was perfect. It was perfect for a gin that is, it reflects that port, the maritime kind of style. It's that sort of off-green colour, and it looks beautiful for our gin. So that was what we went for.
I completely agree with you there, Hannah. It's certainly a bottle that caught my eye. It looks very traditional. I'm surprised to hear that it's actually completely unique to you guys as a bottle design, which is not something you see every day in the world of spirits, but it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I would hope. We do care a lot about being sustainable. So our bottle is completely plastic free. We have just switched to using natural corks as well, which is fantastic. Everything is completely recyclable. And as well as that, all our botanicals are organic, and we are sort of on our way to achieving organic status. It's just sort of it's been put on hold as well for this pandemic, unfortunately.
Well, congratulations to that. It's certainly something I like to hear in 2020. And talk to me about the liquid itself and sort of what you were aiming to achieve with this gin before we all try it at home here. What was it you guys set out to do? Because obviously you mentioned that gin is not your primary focus with the Portofleet distillery. What was it you wanted to do with this gin, and what is it you think it stands for, the liquid itself?
So we wanted, with the gin, we wanted to really tell the story of where we've come from and to lead into where we're going. And that is all about the area and Leith, and the sort of the link with where we are in Leith to the gin is the lime flavour. So lind and lime, a lot of people ask, what is lind? They might think it's a sort of exotic botanical. Lind is actually named after a man who lived in sort of mid-1700s, James Lind. He was part of the Scottish Enlightenment. He was a self-trained doctor living in Edinburgh, joined the Royal Navy. And it's so important now for the sort of conversations that we're having in terms of this pandemic. James Lind actually was the first person to record clinical trials in history. So he had joined the Navy, and scurvy was an affliction of the sea. So many sailors died of scurvy. And James Lind took groups of sailors and gave them different diets and noted down his findings of that. And it was the sailors that, you know, had that diet of citrus fruit that they showed the greatest improvement in terms of the scurvy that they were suffering from. Scurvy is a vitamin C deficiency. And so we wanted that link. And so it was perfect. Leaf and lime, it just had that connection. Wow. Certainly 100 years after James Lind's discoveries, Laughlin Rose, he established Rose's Lime Cordial in Edinburgh. And Rose's Lime Cordial is a worldwide company now. So really with the gin, we wanted that connection with the lime, with leaf. We wanted a gin that's refreshing, that's citrus, that's quenching. It's got that classic juniper. It's juniper led, it's a London dry, but it was really important to make sure that it was balanced. And so that was why we introduced the pink peppercorns. Pink peppercorns just give that real sweetness to the gin. So you've got the lime and the pink peppercorns, and it just balances so well in harmony together. So that was really what we wanted.
Okay, I see. Well, thanks for that. Those of you at home, by no means hold on for myself to take a drink of this. I hope you have already moved on to the first sample. If not, I'm just going to take a little drink just now, and we'll see how Linden Lime holds up.
I mean, definitely on the nose, you'll get that the juniper and the pink peppercorn when it's neat, that just dominates on the nose. And then you should get the lime and a bit of licorice as well. If you are drinking it with tonic, which is what I'm doing just now, you might notice that the gin goes a sort of cloudy colour. And sometimes I do get asked, oh, is that natural? It's totally natural. It's a phenomenon called lushing, which is, we have quite a high oil content in our gin because we use lime peel. And that's all where all the oils are, all those essential citrus oils that we want. And essentially, the more diluted your gin is, the more unbalanced all your oils become in the gin, and it causes that cloudy character. And it just releases all those citrus notes as well.
That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, for me, I completely agree with you. On the palate, there's just something so beautifully balanced between obviously your predominant juniper, but the pink peppercorn and lime just go in tandem together. For me, this is a lovely, refreshing gin, a classic sort of style, and it is definitely sort of, it's true to its roots, and it's got integrity. I'm a big fan, so
yeah. It definitely, it packs a punch, you know, it's a great, just such a refreshing and balanced gin, 44%, you know, I mean, I love it, so. But then definitely, I mean, we recommend just using a neutral tonic with our gin. Normally we kind of work with Schweppes or Fever Tree, but on the nose, the tonic just releases all that sort of lime aroma that you should get if you're having it with tonic. and as well, just that balance, if you're drinking it with tonic, with the juniper and the quinine from the tonic, it's just that just really balanced dryness. So it works very well.
Brilliant. I wish I had some tonic to hand to try that out just now, but unfortunately I do not. But as you say, this thing's got vitamin C in it, so I'll certainly be trying it a lot more.
Oh yeah, but lots of vitamin C, so you won't get scurvy. I don't think, I wouldn't say it cures COVID, but you know, you won't get scurvy. So
fantastic. I was actually looking out for that. So
I drink it all the time, so I'm definitely not vitamin C deficient.
Okay, well, fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. As I say, I'm a huge fan of Linden Lime, and I was going to ask you, what is your favourite way to drink this? But it seems to me you've just recommended with gin and tonic. So
that is sort of a perfect serve. Or other, I mean, I love it in a cocktail, and I've been very creative with all the cocktails that I sort of get to make in my job. It's the best part of my job. I love it. I've actually got, this is a, so if you can see it, this is a gimlet, which is just gin, lime, and a bit of sugar. And that is probably one of the best ways to enjoy our gin. It's just so refreshing, you know, really like sort of tart as well, just makes you want to drink more. So can recommend that.
A gimlet, my old friend. I will definitely be trying that out.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for that, Hannah. We'll get moving on to our next guest of the evening. Second up is somebody I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us tonight. Guillaume Drouin is joining us from, are you in Normandy, Guillaume?
Yep.
Yes, he's joining us from Normandy. He is from the House of Christian Drouin, as it can be translated, I believe, and they are responsible for multi-award-winning vintage Calvados, which is an aged type of apple brandy that is made in Normandy. If you've not heard of it, you can increasingly find it in some of the world's best bars these days. And I really mean it when I say Guillaume and his family really know what they're doing. So tonight, Guillaume is obviously joining us not to speak about Calvados, but about his gin. It is made on the same farm with his family. Now, as a fan of the elegant, fruity Calvados that him and his family make, I know the meticulous processes that they use to select each and every apple that is selected for distillation, for harvesting, then distillation. So I'm excited tonight to see how they transfer that art over into the world of gin production to create a product that is also elegant but vibrant, and more importantly, a product that they are happy to put their name to. So without further ado, it's over to you, Guillaume. Let's hear a bit about yourself and the story behind Le Gin de Christian Drouin. I don't know if I said that properly.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction. Actually, yes, as you explained, the first activity of our company is Calvados. And, you know, about 10 years ago, I started to open my eyes on other categories, but because my background is a winemaker, enologist. I've worked in the wine industry and in the rum industry in the past, and I love playing with flavors. And I mean, there's plenty of things we can do with Calvados, but it's still an AOC with lots of regulations and rules. And I got very curious about this gin category because I realized it was very open. And meeting bartenders that we used to meet for our Calvados, very often they were telling me stories about the new gin they had found. And I started to be curious, would we be able to produce a good gin using our apples from Normandy? And the first thing I did, actually, it all started from a small trip I had in Belgium. And I was visiting a wine shop there. And in this wine shop, they were selling a box for making your gin at home with different botanicals. So I thought, okay, that's fun. I bring that home and I will experiment myself. So I brought the box home. And the first thing I did, I tried to macerate these botanicals into an eau de vie de cidre, a distillation from cider. That was not the way I was going to make the gin, but the idea behind was to check which botanicals would match with the apple flavors. And my first work was to select the flavors that were doing a good match with apple and with juniper. So from quite a lot of experimentation, we actually came with a selection of 8 botanicals. Some of these botanicals are really made to match with apple, such as vanilla, cinnamon, almond, ginger, You know, all these flavors are actually flavors that you might find in a good Calvados. So they really match the apple flavor perfectly well. We've got cardamom in the recipe as well, and that's to sign that it's a gin. I think the cardamom underlined the juniper signature actually in the recipe. And we added two other components, which are rose and lemon, to bring some lighter character to the blend. Now, when I started to work on creating this recipe, you know, I realized that if I was doing this gin as almost all gin I produced, mixing all the botanicals together, macerating them together, I was going to work blind. And I realized, you know, it would take me years to create a good recipe. So my feeling was also, why should I macerate the vanilla in the same way we macerate juniper, or in the same way we macerate cardamom? And so the idea quickly came that, okay, if we want to do something good, we have to work every botanical separately. And so when we make le gin de Christian Drouin, so to make this bottle, the first thing we do is we create 9 distillates. So for each botanical, we do a single and separate maceration and distillation. And so we get 9 distillates, which we blend at the end to create le gin, this recipe. For each of these botanicals, we adapt the time of maceration. We don't always use the same degree of alcohol for the maceration. When we distill the juniper, we distill it twice, sometimes 3 times. When we distill vanilla, we only do 1 distillation after maceration. So we really adapt the process to every botanical. So it might look very technical, but I had this feeling, you know, that it was the only way to produce a very deep gin with a lot of concentration. It was important for us to produce a gin that one could enjoy neat. It's a sipping gin. It's of course a very good gin to blend, to make cocktails with. You can also make a good gin and tonic with the gin, but you can also enjoy it just as it is because it's so rich and complex. So just to better explain the process, the base of the gin is a grain alcohol because, you know, we have to start as any gin with a neutral alcohol. And using apple to produce a neutral alcohol didn't really make sense. You know, a neutral alcohol is neutral, so you don't bring any flavors with it. So the base is a grain alcohol, but in the process of production, we make a specific distillation from ciders, which we use as a kind of flavoring components in the recipe. And so this distillation of cider is actually one of the 9 distillations we produce to make the recipe at the end.
Wow, that is, truth be told, it's everything I wanted to hear from you just now. I had no idea how you guys produced this, but it's kind of what I hoped that in a romantic way. It's kind of blending together a symphony, you know, which is unusual in the gin world. It's no better or worse than other production styles that we've got here tonight, but it definitely resonates, I would say, and I hope you agree, with the sort of processes you use to make Calvados. Is that right? Because you're blending together different aspects, aromas, characters.
You know, that was my way of thinking when creating the recipe. You know, I thought I don't have experience in the gin category, but I have a good experience with blending. I have a great experience in distillation. And so, you know, I thought that was the best way I could work on this project. Wow.
And just as when you were thinking about doing this project, producing your gin, I understand you're probably a well-traveled man, so I had great experience in it. When you went home to the farm and explained to your family, who are obviously very well known in the vintage Calvados world, that you were wanting to make a gin, how did that go down?
Well, you know, when I first told this idea to my father, who is actually still working in the company, he's officially retired, but he's not someone we can stop. So still very active. And when I told him the first time that project, you know, he thought that was just something like this that I said. So he said, "Oh yeah, it's a good idea." But then, you know, finally 2 or 3 years later, the project was nearly done, and I was ready to bottle it. So then, you know, he started to be shaking a bit and told me, Guillaume, you're sure you want to make a gin, because there are plenty of gin in the market, and gin is very different from Calvados. So, how do you assume that the market needs your gin? And he was the first person I really had to convince it was a good project. And my feeling on that was, if it's a gin that I'm happy to drink neat, it means it's a gin we could be happy to sign with our name. And I think it was important also to say it's a gin that looks like what we are. It's made in a very artisanal way. It's a long work of blending, playing with flavors. And so, I thought that's what we are. It's in our DNA, so that's okay. We can make that gin.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with that. After just tasting it there, the apple is very prevalent in it, just straight away. But it's definitely like a non-classic style gin. It's complex, it's elegant, and I'm not rich enough to own a bar, but if I owned a bar, I would have the Christian Drouin Calvados right next to the gin. They can easily stand together, not on separate shelves as conventional bars may have them.
Maybe, just a few suggestions on how to drink it. If you drink it neat, you can drink it with some ice. I think it actually helps the flavors to come out nicely. If you want to make a gin and tonic with the gin, I suggest a very light and not too bitter tonic, because there's a bit of bitterness in our recipe. So I think it's really important to find a tonic that has very few bitterness. And I suggest actually Fever-Tree Mediterranea, which is really a good match with Le Gin. Another recipe I love a lot is an easy one to make. It's called Bee's Knees. So it's actually Le Gin plus some lemon juice and a bit of honey.
Oh, wow.
Very simple, but it's a good way to show all the expression of the flavors of Le Gin. If I have another minute, and if we can do that, do you think I can share with you very quickly some images of the estate? Is that something we can do, you think?
I think that is absolutely condoned on our end. Yes, let's see.
Okay. Do you see the bottle here? Does it work? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to. I wanted to show you actually some pictures of, just very quickly. This is the estate where we produce Le Gin. It's an old farm from the 17th century, and it's located in the Pays d'Auge region in Normandy. And I wanted to show you also what the orchards look like. We have cows under the apple trees, and the cows actually help us to produce a good Calvados. They eat all the apples that are rotten, all the apples that fall at first, which are the wrong apples, are eaten by the cows, and then they cut the grass, and then we can start a good harvesting in September. So it's a very sustainable and organic way of production that we have. Actually, the trees are not treated. We do absolutely no treatments. Maybe a last picture, if I can find it, well, just to show you what a lot of apples look like. That's when we, just before pressing the fruits. And so we can press up to 20 tons of apples every day in autumn.
That's certainly a lot of apples. I couldn't even hazard a guess at how many that is.
Just trying to go back now. My computer is a bit slow. You guys are able to stop sharing? Go on.
Guillaume still with us? Well, that was brilliant. As you can see, so far up tonight, we have had Hannah at the Linden Lime Distillery, who is the Port of Leaf Distillery. Sorry, I'm getting confused looking up. There he is. Okay, Guillaume's back with us. Sorry. As you can see, those of you who are watching,
Yeah.
already we've had Hannah at the Port of Leaf Distillery with Linden Lime. These guys are new on the scene with a classic style of gin that is sort of resonates with their tradition. And then second up, we have had Guillaume at the House of Drouin, who have been operating for in a farm that is centuries old. They have been making vintage Calvados since the 60s, and they make a sort of complex, non-classic gin. So already we've got two sort of very kind of distinctive gins from each other. The third up is no different. Next up, we're going to welcome the charming Barney Wilczak. Now, Barney resides in the idyllic surroundings of the Cotswolds and has spent most of his life, I believe, as a photographer, capturing the immense beauty that is sort of surrounding there in the Cotswolds. His high level of focus, biology, and artistic expression now guide his unparalleled creations at Capreolus Distillery in the Cotswolds. And now the ethos of Capreolus Distillery is fascinating beyond words for me. So I'll let him share it with everyone and not give too much away. So Barney, tell us a little bit about yourself and Capreolus Distillery, which, may I add, I stole this from your website, led a certain sommelier to utter the words mind blown open as a conclusion to their experience. So I'm excited to hear more. Tell us all about it, please, Barney.
Yeah, that was, Jan, very kind. I have to say we're an incredible company tonight and all products I really love. So I'm, over the moon to be here. I mean, really interesting to follow on from Guillaume, because we actually specialize in producing eau de vie. So eau de vie are fruit brandies. Most of what we've done has never been done in the UK before. There's reasons for that. They take a great deal of idiocy, expense. They're very hard to produce. But what we're doing is we are producing terroir-driven spirits. So we work with fruits, over 90% come from within 50 miles of us. And for me, it's important to kind of segue the conversation away from gin just for a second. In my history, I spent, as a photojournalist specializing in conservation stories, I had a slightly illegal hobby where I was distilling all these fruits that I've grown up within this incredibly rich area. And what we do is we take these fruits. I have a raspberry eau de vie next to me, and this takes 33.5 kilos of fruit to make 1 litre. Every single berry sorted by hand, every bad piece of grass removed, and we wild ferment those, distill them, and you capture this incredible essence, this concentration that every glass has a kilogram of fruit in it, and you taste 100,000 pips. You taste the plant. And for me, working in this way, the aromas, the scent, the flavor, the texture, you bring yourself closer to the plant. You start tasting the leaves, you start smelling those orchards that I've grown up in. And coming to the gin was a really odd thing for me, because I was producing, eau de vie at that stage for 6-7 years. Now I'm 11-12 years in, and I'm finally happy with the level we're working to, which is how anally retentive I am. And I kind of thought, well, okay, let's make a gin, let's produce it in a way that has that same complexity, that same integration, that same balance. That, what is it that excites me? And coming from an eau de vie background, you're working to capture this very singular moment, this point in the year, that moment where you pluck a rowan berry from a tree or a sloe, that kind of absolute moment of perfection. And it's a really strange thing when you've devoted so many years to a very singular thing, as with Calvados, capturing that moment, to then suddenly have this whole palette of flavors where you say, well, okay, we'll apply those principles and we'll essentially use them to paint and extend flavors. you know, the typical way to create a gin is to take an existing London dry gin recipe and then modify it. And this gives you great products, really recognizable, something that's really understandable. You know, again, you'd be an idiot to do it any other way. So I did. And, you know, we thought, okay, well, I want to build this from the ground up. How do we go about actually creating something completely from scratch? So all of those years where I was distilling for myself, I was a photojournalist. I specialized in conservation stories. So I got to work around the world with some of the world's best botanists. So I have a, you know, not compared to them, but I have a reasonable botany background. And I thought, okay, well, we'll divide the gin into flavor groups to build it from the ground up. So we had juniper, pine and resin, we had floral, we had citrus and berries, we had roots, earth and licorice. And I thought of every plant I knew that would work really strongly within those groups. And we wrote it down and we came back and we looked at it, and we suddenly had this list of nearly 80 plants, and we distilled everyone separately, both by maceration. We went back, we distilled them by vapor extraction, hanging them above the liquid. And I spent about 4.5 months sat next to my partner Hannah on the sofa every night, nosing, spitting in a saucepan. She's a lucky girl. And we started assembling these items, you know, and where with eau de vie, you're capturing this moment. What we started doing, many of these plants had similar chemical components in them. So there's a lot of blood orange in there, zest. We work with a Sicilian cooperative and we zest up to 2,600 kilos of oranges by hand every year. I have 3 chest freezers of them vacuum packed and frozen to keep that vitality, to keep all that aroma. And although you taste those berried orange notes in there, actually what you're also getting is woody berryness from wild rose hips. You're getting sweet and sour berry and almond from rowan berries. You're getting really voluminous berry from hibiscus with no acidity. You're getting herbaceous berry from blackcurrant leaf. So what we're doing is, you know, for me, I can't unpick what we've created, but I was tasting things and pushing and pulling and stretching and extending. It's a ridiculous way to work, and we ended up with 34 botanicals in there, which, you know, is an insane amount to work with. But everyone's in there for a purpose, you know, everyone's in there to create this thing that has structure, has balance, has extension, has texture. We're up at 47%, and that's not just to be strong, that's so it's holding all that viscosity and oils in there.
I was going to say there, what made you sit on 47% with an astonishing 34 botanicals? It's impressive, it's complex, it's definitely for the connoisseurs. So what was it that felt right at 34 botanicals and 47%?
You know what, we could have easily doubled it, you know, the amount in there, and, you know, we can, you know, there's a slight kind of war of attrition with how many botanicals can you kind of get in there. To me, everything was in there for a reason, where you're looking to add something or tweak something or add that touch of almond or to add that extension of florality. Structure, 47%. Again, it's holding that depth of essential oils in, like the linden lime oils goes very opaque when you dilute it. But we never chill filter because I don't want to remove texture, I don't want to remove aroma, I don't want to remove flavour. And just keeping it at that level, we still find that, you know, I'm tasting it out of a grappa glass here. I've come from this background, the eau de vie background, where we're drinking things neat, we're looking for maximum flavour and aroma. And for me, the aroma carries really well here. If you have a higher ABV, you actually find that more of those volatile aromas don't escape from the liquid. So you actually start suppressing the nose slightly and you get more alcohol. You know, so for us, it's the perfect balance, you know, and you find with different spirits this varies. So, you know, for us, I think that's kind of the perfect amount.
Wow, and again, just like the guys before you, obviously eau de vie is is what you're known for, and just for everyone else that's watching that hasn't had the pleasure of trying some of Barney's eau de vie, it is out of this world. I've never tried anything like it. It's delightful, and I'm sure there's many people that will agree with me. When I drink this gin just now, it is rich and sort of oily and complex. It's an extension of what you've explained goes on at Capreolus Distillery and what you try and do with the eau de vie. And I know for a fact many people are probably going to be outraged that I say this, especially my boss. But it's a gin, and I think it adds terroir, you know.
Brilliant. No, I'm so pleased. One thing I didn't mention is that's ridiculous is we do this from the old lean-to greenhouse of my childhood home. We distill in there. We overlook water meadows. It's a wonderful lifestyle thing to do, and we're just incredibly lucky to do something we love and to work with fantastic people, and work in a fantastic industry.
Brilliant. Well, that was fantastic. And just before we move on, how do you personally like to drink this gin, Barney?
Vast quantities. No, you know what? We find that it drinks beautifully, either neat, absolutely in gin and tonic, works fantastically. Again, we use a very light tonic because we've tried to create a very balanced spirit, so we want it to act as a canvas. Cocktails, classic ones. The only good cocktail I've ever come up with myself, we call the Shema. It's a measure of juniper, which anyone in France will know, which is a absinthe. It's a Artemisia juniper, a plant related to the absinthe plant that people know, wormwood. And that's mixed with apple juice, which we press from the orchards around us. So 4 parts apple juice, 1 part juniper, 1 part gin. And it's very soft, beautiful and herbal.
Wow, brilliant. I personally love that. And again, just the fruitiness, the complexity and the rich, elegant sort of mouthfeel to your gin is brilliant. And I'm sure everyone else who's trying at home will completely agree with me. So moving on to the next gin tonight, Jack Waring, who is a superstar bartender from ex-Dandelion bartender here in London, is unfortunately not managing to make it with us tonight. So I shall press on and talk a little bit about the Porter's Old Tom gin that we have in our sample packs tonight. Now, Old Tom gin is a traditional style of gin that owes a lot to gin's history. It was predominantly sort of first about in the 18th century, and it appears it's making a resurgence in today's gin scene thanks to people like the Porter's Distillery. Now, Scotland may not be well known for its tropical fruit, but Aberdeen's porters are certainly trying to change that. Their micro distillery is located right underneath Orchid, which is a popular, stylish bar in Aberdeen. I've spent many occasions in Orchid. It's fantastic. You know what they're doing. It's a great place. If you're ever up the northeast of Scotland, please do go visit. Now, this is a gin with noticeably different character to what you may expect from your sort of classic juniper-led spirit with floral, sort of earthy notes to it, and that's because it's an Old Tom. Now, the Old Tom is essentially cold distilled in their micro distillery, which again is different from anything that we've seen tonight. It means that it's distilled at a lower temperature than what the other gins we've tasted tonight will have been, and it's done in a vacuum. This is done to retain the delicate flavors in the botanicals that they use. So without going in too technical here, when you're using a pot still, essentially you boil it up like a kettle. The liquid in it vaporizes, and the flavors and the alcohols rise through the still. Doing this can sometimes simply obliterate some of the more delicate notes and botanicals, and to solve that problem, you can do a thing called cold distillation. And this is what the guys up at Orchid have really mastered in Porter's micro distillery. The thing that makes it an Old Tom gin is the sweetening after. Now, to call yourself a classic gin, you cannot add any sort of sweeteners to it. But this is an old Tom, and that's how they get around it. Where it comes from is back in the day, back in the 18th century, when much of the sort of bathtub gin that was flying around the UK, most commonly London as well, they would have had to sweeten gin back then because it was absolutely brutal, is a word I will use, and I can imagine it being. So they used to add flavorings and sweeteners to get away with it, and these guys have added some passion fruit amongst some other tropical fruits to it. I mean, it's a delight. It's 40%. It's just a little bit more smooth than everything we've tried tonight. It doesn't have that bam of juniper, but it's still all very, very well integrated. And it's certainly something that has made a sort of rise in popularity around popular bars and amongst the drinks industry that I have seen. So if you're heading out anywhere soon, or if you do see Jack wearing, please tell him to let me know. But please do try out some Old Tom the next time you visit a bar. Anyway, finishing off our lineup tonight again is someone that I'm absolutely excited beyond words to introduce. Pretty well known in the drinks industry, Simon Ford. He is co-founder of the 86 Company and co-creator of Ford's Gin. He's here to tell us about the bold and powerful Ford's Officer's Reserve Overproof Gin. That is certainly a tongue twister, but I think I got that quite right there. Something that, again, to finish off tonight, is very different from everything else we've looked at, honestly, in style, in character, in colour and taste. So Simon, just before he takes to the stage here, he is a true heavyweight in the drinks industry. Just a quick Google search can tell you that. I'm sure I could spend many hours asking him about his experience, hearing some of the tales and hearing about some of the things he's probably seen. As an ex-bartender to entrepreneur, he has a lot to talk about. He's accomplished a lot. His drive and creativity as an ex-bartender myself inspires me. So Simon, let's hear it. Tell us a bit about yourself, the 86 Company, and why you decided to create Ford's Gin.
Cool. Thank you, Gareth. Very, very, very kind words. So the company, obviously coming from that bartender background that you just alluded to, was very much founded in looking at what a bartender might use our products for. We always had this feeling that what you see in the bottle is only a part of the finished product. What someone does with it is the finished product. And so we really took a sort of reverse engineering approach to looking at how flavors and oil content, some of the sort of common themes of tonight's conversation, actually affected the finished product of a gin and tonic or a well-made martini. So that put us firmly back into a place where we made a London dry gin. And I would say it's a London dry gin that perhaps has a little bit of modern hindsight and some input from bartenders. And so what we were essentially doing was sort of building a recipe in a similar way that a chef might put together a dish. You're looking at what pairs with various different things. We use jasmine flower in the gin because it pairs well with honey, which is great in a drink like the bee's knees. We made sure, if you look at cassia, it goes very well with mint. And we had grapefruit, which also goes well with mint, and that would be good for drinks like the South Side. So we were very much looking at how the finished product would turn out. And of course, what we ended up with was a traditional London dry gin that we think is a good solid go-to for mixing in classic mixed drinks that we know and love, that have made gin famous over the years. So that was really sort of the foundations and philosophies of our company, and why that sort of bartender connection meant so much to us in the way we develop and sort of take an approach to making and mixing drinks. We're always thinking about the end product being how people enjoy it, although if you are someone who likes to drink neat gin, you and I are this, you're my people.
Okay, I see.
So But to tell you about the gin that we're talking about tonight, it was sort of a little bit of a self-indulgent project, really, because Ford's London Dry Gin is bottled at 45% ABV. And this is obviously a Navy strength. Now, the reason I call it self-indulgent, and please don't judge me, but about every year that we'd be making Fords, I would bottle about 5 cases of Ford's gin at 60% ABV. I've always been a fan of high proof spirits. I think they mix well. They hold more of the botanical flavor. And actually, was interesting because as a sort of self-proclaimed fan of juniper, the core ingredient of gin, when we were bottling Fords at 60% ABV, it held more of that juniper flavor. So it was almost like a juniper bomb for me. Juniper can sort of have a sort of bitterness that's not everyone's favorite, which is why it's often balanced by lots of other botanicals. But I'm a big fan of that juniper flavor. So I was sort of doing this for myself. I do some of it for bitters, but mostly making these full flavored martinis. Now, I never really wanted to sort of, try and continue to do what others do. I worked at Plymouth Gin for many years, and of course they are the kings of Navy strength. Their history is rooted within Navy strength gins. And so if I was ever to sort of go in that territory, I didn't want to just bottle Ford's gin at 57% ABV, which is common. And so this, I did some research on Navy strength gin. A lot of it came from my time at Plymouth. And even though albeit some wary research, it was certainly extensive, it sort of came to the conclusion that there weren't really many gins out there that had been aged in cask that were of Navy strength. And I've never been a big fan of Navy strength aged gins.
Just as a quick question, without sort of taking up too much of your time there, can you quickly explain why Navy strength is a thing?
Yes, it's great. So this, I actually was going to get there, Gareth, but it's a great question because I think it's a...
Continue, do not let me interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's a fun story. So before Bartholomew Sykes invented the hydrometer, which is what we commonly use to measure ABV and alcohol content, the method of actually measuring alcohol was to pour alcohol on top of gunpowder, and you would light the gunpowder. And if the gunpowder lit, you were proving there was enough alcohol in it. This was rather important because if you were taking gin and rum aboard the ships, the last thing you wanted to do was, if you spilt gin and rum on your gunpowder, compromise yourself in battle. So you needed to make sure you had enough alcohol in your gin and rum to make sure the gunpowder was still light. So you were essentially proving that you had enough alcohol. So that's where the term proof came from. Now, when Bartholomew Sykes invents the hydrometer, the government and the Navy, respectively, both start experimenting with what they feel is the level of alcohol that should constitute Navy strength. The government came up with 57% ABV, and the Navy came up with 54.5. So we bottled at 54.5, so slightly lower than most that you might see. But that's really was the sort of story behind how Navy strength came to be. The thing that was sort of slightly missing on the market for me was that most Navy strengths hadn't been in cask. And of course, that's how gin was essentially transported at the time. And so the only thing I could find in my research was some old shipping records about how long gin actually lasted on board the ships. Now, our Dutch friends across the water would bring a lot of the Geneva on board, and it would last a long time. But us Brits would not take as much on board, and we would sort of stock up on gin as we went. We would stock up in gin in the Balearics. We'd stock up in gin in Africa, which is why there's a history of gin there. And so I saw that these shipping records saw that the gin would last 3 to 6 weeks. And I was like, that's not long in cask. So we started an experiment where I got some casks, Madeira and port and various others, sherry, things that I would think that the English would commonly use for transporting gin, and just wanted to see what this overproof Navy strength gin tasted like. And in our company, there's a guy called Tim Cooper. I call him the man from Del Monte because he just puts me through every tough situation whenever we're sort of doing new products. And the Amontillado sherry cask was the first we tasted, and I chose it as the first one we were going to taste out of all of the casks that we'd experimented with, because I thought it was going to be the worst. And it turned out to be everyone's favorite. Immediately, we all thought that we had the gin right there, and it was at the lowest level of aging. So it's not really aging. I think that it's sort of a disservice to people that age spirits to call it aging, because it only spent 3 weeks in it. But
I guess you can call it resting then.
Resting, yes.
Yeah.
And that comes from my deep-rooted philosophy that gin should be about botanicals. And if you overaged it, you start to dominate those botanicals. And I wanted the botanicals to do the journey. So essentially, as you taste this gin, get ready for some heat for sure. This is 54.5%. It's also, 50% of our recipes, juniper, is a high juniper content gin in the first place. And this, at this ABV, it seems to hold more of the juniper flavor than our traditional London dry. So you get a lot of juniper and you get that bitterness, but what you get is a little bit of that nuttiness that you would expect from an Amontillado cask. You get that sweetness that you would expect from a sherry cask. And that takes the balance of perhaps the heat and the spice from the juniper and makes something that I personally fell in love with, like at first sip. And we recreated it by only, I think we bought 28 casks from 28, 29 casks from sherry. So it was a small production run that we did. We put it in at 3 weeks. And I'll be totally honest, this is the trade secret right here, but of course transparency is everything to us in this industry. Even at 3 weeks, I felt that it didn't have enough botanicals, so I did blend a bit more Ford's gin and overproof back into it to bring back that botanical profile. So really what you're getting is just a touch of Amontillado in that moment. I apologize, I didn't bring tasting cups, so I'm just gonna crack this one open and do it in a teacup with you. Yeah, so lots of juniper, and it's really interesting because of that extra ABV. It held more of that oil content. You know, it doesn't lose as much as as the first gin, but this would lose in the extra 60% ABV. The extra ABV really sort of brings more of that oil content. So when you taste it, it's very rich and full-bodied, and the sherry cask adds to that too. So again, very good for martinis. And for if you're any of you based in London, we know that our friends at Happiness Forgets are actually selling bottled Navy strength Officers Reserve, Ford's Officers Reserve martinis right now to go. So if you can see that fullness right now and you want a professionally made martini, there to go to.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, for your daily exercise. Do get down to Happiness Forgets. And just back on the overproof itself, I'm a man that drinks cask strength whiskey, or a boy that drinks cask strength whiskey, and so my palate is used to stronger things. For me, when I drink it, I get real plum and sort of caramel notes. It's fantastic. However, I do know that people around the world get slightly scared of the high percentage just when they first look at it. And as a word to them, how do you recommend they approach it?
That is a great question. I mean, I do think there was enough going on the palate that it sort of, but you still, to sort of combat that strength, but there's still, your stomach gets warm. And I think that you, with a sip of this at room temperature. So I do think that adding water, if you're sort of doing it analytics and letting those flavors evolve and then tasting it so that it's not so strong and there's not so much alcohol is important. And it's very good to remind you now that if you add that water, all of a sudden you're releasing the alcohol. So give it a second to let the water and the gin sort of merge together and let the alcohol is released before you go in, unless you're going to really get a hit of alcohol. At the same time, we make our drinks, make our gins to be mixed. And we always, think about it in that term. The classic drinks that were created with Navy strength gin definitely work very well with this. A pink gin, for those who are sort of this is almost going against what you asked, Gareth, but a pink gin is actually just gin and Angostura bitters, and so it's a very strong drink is actually something that works very well with this. But what I actually like to do is combine gin and tonic. Again, another cocktail of the merchant navies, gin and tonic, and add Angostura bitters, or use the aromatic tonic that Fever Tree use. So I find that's a very good way of bringing something with full flavor. So you want a full flavored tonic water. I also recommend tiki drinks with this. Actually, take some of those rum drinks and translate them to gin, and let the botanicals add something different and original to your cocktails.
I can see that, actually. I can see how that would work, actually. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, that was absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge fan of that Ford's Officers Reserve, and for anybody watching just now, yes, the percentage is 54.5%, and yes, you might not be the sort of person that usually approaches spirits like that, but approach it with a touch of water. You know, take a small sip on the palate, move it around your mouth, and check out the character before you just consider it a high strength spirit that's going to burn. This stuff has a lot to offer flavor wise. It's delightful, and it's no surprise that a legend like Simon is behind the making of it. It makes complete sense now to me. So thank you for that. Just before we go, I have a couple of questions for everybody on the panel tonight, and I designed them in a certain way because we're lucky that everyone is actually in a different place of the world right now. Simon, where is it you are right now?
I'm actually quarantined here in Nashville, Tennessee right now, where social distancing is being enforced by tear gas. So yeah, a long way away. Sorry, bad joke on a bad situation. But.
Okay, no, but that's my question that's coming right up. In the current climate around the world, obviously we have coronavirus predominantly affecting everyone. How is the current drink scene where you are? Let's start off with Hannah.
I mean, for us, it's been really amazing to see how just versatile and great that our small team has been to just combat, you know, like all the pressures that coronavirus has brought to us. We are a very small team, and we really have to pull together. But the best thing about this is we've seen like sales have increased. People want to buy the gin, and with that, it means that, you know, we have to pull together to come in and actually produce together. And I mean, most of us on the team are not production staff, so we've really had to come in and be flexible in our skills and really pull together and just work together. It's difficult because we're in that bubble. So for the first couple of weeks, there was only one person basically at the still house. Now there's like 2, 3, and just bottling. I mean, I was bottling today. It's hard with 3 people, but we make it work.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I'm sure everybody right now is having to adapt to weird situations. Yeah, fantastic. And just quickly, we are running sort of out of time, but just quickly, tell us a little bit more about what's in store from Portofleet Distillery with regards to new products.
So, new products wise, this year we are releasing a new line of ports. I don't know how well people are informed with us, but we have our cask partners. So we released an Oloroso Sherry, and that's been our main cask partner product for the last year. But we're releasing
Barron, is that right?
Yes. So we have our Oloroso Sherry from Bodegas Barron. Then this year we're releasing our port line. So we'll start with a tawny port. The plan is to also do a white port, and then continue to work on the build of our whiskey distillery. Thankfully, with coronavirus, we're now back on site, so we can start piling on our site. We don't really know how much we can get done in terms of construction. It'll just depend on the Scottish Government advice and, you know, who can work together, but we're making sure that, you know, everyone that's on site has enough hand sanitizer, because that was something that we were doing for you know,
Absolutely.
a good month or so at the start of coronavirus, just because there was so much demand for it. We really couldn't ignore the demand. People needed it, so we made it. And
That's great to hear
you know,
you're pitching in and making a difference.
yeah.
Especially with such a small team, that's absolutely brilliant. And I'm certainly looking forward to the new products that you guys have at Portleaf Distillery coming out. And I've not actually had the chance to visit inside the distillery, but I have seen the outside of it. And it's probably the most fascinating building I've seen in a long time, especially as it's a distillery. It's perched right on the harbour. It's very thin and tall. It's kind of like a modern, minimalist, experimental White House. I love it. It's cool. It's interesting. So well done to that.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like right now we're in an industrial unit and we work in a shed. It's a garden shed. And I love the shed. And I don't think I want to leave the shed. But, you know, I'm ready to move into the big distillery when it comes. So it's really exciting.
Oh, well, fantastic. And just quickly, before we run out of time, I'll go on to the other three guys. Barney, in the current climate in the world and everything that's going on, how are things with you? How is the drinks scene down in the Cotswold? Where do you see things going? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Sorry, excuse the dog. She's the most important member of the team. No, we're split between two markets. So we're, the gin world is good, you know, and we're seeing lots of popularity, but we've got so many friends in those top flight restaurants in London and throughout Europe and Italy, France, Austria, and they're really hurting at the moment because they're all closed at the moment. And, you know, this will affect us, but we're just looking at supporting the farmers we've spent years with working with, you know, and actually making sure, you know, we're taking less money this year so that we can actually pay them money and keep that side going. We're investing a lot in the trade, so we're doing a lot of tastings with sommeliers, doing a lot of training for that. So we kind of all come out of it stronger, you know, and I think for all those people who are watching this, if you love the products that any of us are doing, and actually if you love those products that excite you, go and buy some, you know, actually go and support them. And we've kind of got less money, but the first thing we did this year, our main distributor in London, we went and bought a case of gin, one of my favourite Armagnac producers that I know is suffering. We've gone and bought a bottle. It means we're going to drink amazingly this year. It's not a big hardship to make that an investment. So, absolutely, you know, we're kind of in a good place, and we're a small company. We're very nimble. We live in a beautiful part of the world. So, you know, like everybody at the moment, we're hurting, but there are people that, you know, are in a lot worse positions. So we're just very thankful.
Okay. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I know for a fact the amount of work you'll be doing on the ground. I mean, I don't know if she's in the call somewhere right now, but my boss is the head buyer for the company, and she passed on a story that every time she calls you and looking for bottles of ODV, you're knee deep in fruit. So
absolutely. If you want to come and hand grade 4,000 kilos of raspberries this summer, we'll have you berry by berry, piece of grass by piece of grass. But yeah, we'd love to.
Absolutely brilliant. And Barney, thanks for joining us tonight. Guillaume, just on to you, and then Simon afterwards. How is the drink scene over in Normandy? What are you guys doing to combat the situation, and how do you see things going?
Well, we've mainly taken some time, you know, to think about our strategy, because there was less activity as usually. So, you know, we had more time, a little bit less stress, and so, you know, it was a unique chance to think about new blends, take some time to work on the aging process. We've tried to help as well to fight against the pandemic. We've produced some hydroalcoholic solutions, but, you know, mainly we have taken time to think about new projects, work on packaging creations, working on new blends, and we certainly hope the situation will get better very soon. We have already seen many good signs here in Normandy. The beaches are opening again. We see the restaurants opening as well since last Tuesday. So I mean, we're getting back to normal. It's a good news, and it was a good period actually to take a break. Also spend some time with family. It's something very important for us here. So
of course. So using the time constructively, brilliant. I believe we have a question for you, Guillaume. Billy, can we hear the question? I believe Billy's.
Sorry, I was distracted by something else. No, Guillaume, one of my colleagues, Daniele, was asking about the wonders of the fact that you have all these casks lying around, and Simon has done some work with cask aging of gin. Have you thought about doing some Calvados cask aged?
Yeah, we've got a line like this. We have a version of Le Gin, which is called Le Gin Calvados Cask Finish, which was actually aged in Calvados cask. So we've taken casks that were used for our Calvados, for our VSOP Calvados. So they were 10 years old. They've been used during 10 years for the Calvados. And then after emptying these casks, we've used them for Le Gin. It's the same blend as the one we make for the classical recipe, but with a little bit more juniper in it. And the first version was aged 8 months. What we're bottling now has been aged over 1 year.
I think he'll be very pleased because he was mostly saying, is there some more coming down the line because he really likes it. Also, what's your opinion on using it in cocktails? He says he quite likes it in a Martinez. Is there anything you might use it for other than sort of like drinking on its own or with tonic?
Do you speak about the gin that was aged in Calvados cask or the regular version? I think a good way to have it is as a sour. So with lemon juice, egg white, and liquid syrup. And that's I think a really great way to enjoy the gin Calvados cask aged. There's also a recipe which is a nice old recipe called Angel Face, which was actually the favorite cocktail from Al Capone in the US. That's made of 1/3 Calvados, 1/3 gin, and 1/3 apricot liqueur. So it works really well with Le Gin aged Calvados cask.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Gareth, back over to you, mate.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And by the look of things, I'm not the only person in the room who likes the sound of it. Barney, your dog there is raising its paws in the air, dying to try.
She's a great connoisseur for these things, especially ADV.
It's, I mean, you might as well tell us what's his or her name.
This is Pippin. Pippin is in the apple, and also a beauty in the 1920s, but she's the person that keeps us sane at the distillery, so she's always there to help us.
Wow, I'm not going to lie, that's potentially the most adorable thing I've heard. And finally, over on to Simon. Whilst the music may have stopped, the bars may have closed, how is the drinks scene over where you are in Nashville? How do you see it going, and what's in store for you guys?
As always, I've been absolutely mesmerized and amazed at the way that bartenders and bar owners have managed to sort of, and restaurants have managed to pivot their businesses over here. We get our local, we get a basket of food. We don't go to the supermarket now. We actually get our baskets of food from the local restaurants because they are trying to keep the local farmers that supply them alive. And from a bartending perspective, to-go cocktails is become a phenomenon, and people are responding and actually purchasing them to support their local restaurants and bars. So we've been working with restaurants on lending them canning machines, for example, so they can can cocktails that deliver, and bottled martinis and things like that. So we're very much sort of staying true to our core values of supporting the bartender community. And we've also sort of been working with them to feed the people on the front line. So we raise money and then put that money through the restaurants so that they can pay their staff, but then we're providing food for out of work hospitality staff and people working in the local hospitals. So it's been a big community sort of pull together. And I think it was quite sort of it was powerful here because we had a a tornado hit the community just ahead. So everyone was sort of already starting to work together to rebuild, just before COVID-19. So we've had a double whammy here locally. So a lot going on to support each other to keep everyone's businesses running, and to Barney's point, everyone's hurting a little bit. So we're just trying to sort of stretch through and keep going through this moment so that we can come out the other side hopefully intact.
Absolutely, and I absolutely hope the same for everybody to come out of that, so we can all enjoy a lovely gin martini, gin and tonic, Negroni, whatever it is you like to drink together eventually soon. And I'm fairly confident that we will. So on that note, ladies and gents, I'm going to wrap it up and just say thank you to everyone that has joined us to watch from home. Those of you with and without the packs, I hope you've enjoyed it. Just as a side note, this is my first time appearing on the internet, so thanks for blessing your ears with my presence. And to Hannah, to Barney, to Guillaume, to Simon, thank you very much. And to everyone that tried the gins or would like to try the gins, please do head over to the whiskyexchange.com, where they're all available with my seal of approval. Okay. Thank you very much. And we shall wrap up there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Everybody, that's the live stream has now been turned off. Thank you very much, everybody, for putting up with me not being able to unmute myself. That was excellent. Loads of cool stuff. As I said, I may need to do some talking about all of your gins tomorrow. I now have many things to say, which I need to squeeze into 10 minutes. Even better. So thank you very much. Gareth.
Thank you very much, guys, for taking the time out of your evenings. I'm not sure what time it is in Nashville right now. Sorry, Simon, but even-ish.
It was noon. It was a good time to start drinking.
Well, brilliant. So okay. Thanks very much for taking the time out of your... Before
we run away, I've got a quick question from a couple of folks. I'll just unmute them so they can say hello. I've hit the button. Do you want to hit, Neil and Lisa, do you want to hit your unmute? Yeah. There we go. You want to say hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Cool.
Hi. We would like to know, right, how is the best way to drink gin? Should you drink it, like, keep it in the freezer, in the fridge, or as room temperature?
That's if you're going to drink it neat.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? That broke up a little bit there.
Sorry, would you keep your gin in the freezer, in the fridge, or would you have it room temperature if you're drinking it neat?
I see. So super chilled, or room temperature?
Yes, yes.
Would any of our panel like to answer that?
Good. I'll jump in there. Everything is always subjective and how you should enjoy it. But personally, I always think that it's really good to try at room temperature. You're not suppressing aromas. You're not, 16 to 18 degrees like a red wine. You're not suppressing aromas. You're not suppressing flavor, which cold does. But you can, if the alcohol is a distraction, we usually open up with water. So for me, none of these things are too prescriptive, but actually try it neat, try it at room temperature, try adding water. But even with cold, things change, flavors change, dilution changes things. That's just my view. So if anyone else wants to jump in.
I was just going to add, I agree with you. If you were evaluating a gin for its quality and its flavor and really sort of looking at what flavors it has, everything that Barney just said, I'm a self-proclaimed fan of the Duke's Martini, which is essentially frozen gin. And so there's a textural thing that happens when you take it from the freezer. And so even though you might not be getting the full enjoyment of every flavor that gin has to offer, that cold flavor, that thickness that happens, and they express the oils from the garnish and just add a little spritz of vermouth. It's very dangerous, but I'm a huge fan of it.
So basically it is, it depends what sort of time of day it is. Is the answer there. That's what I've gathered anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. All right then, guys. So unfortunately, the battery on my laptop is about to die, at which point in time this whole meeting is going to disappear. So if I wrap this up now, say thank you much for everybody for coming along. Thank you much for Gareth, and well done for surviving. Yes, so hopefully we shall see you all again soon. But anyway, no. If my lovely events team colleagues can hang around, I need to have a chat with you about something. But the rest of you, goodbye for now, and we'll see you at the next tasting.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.